I'm going to draw again, a vertebra over here. And we're going to talk about class 2 mutation. So we're talking about myeloid line, okay, still. I will stress it over here, myeloid or line. Okay, so myeloid or myeloblasts. And first we're going to do class 2 mutation. Class 2 mutations. So you could call them loss of function, or the ones, remember, that have a maturation block. Okay, so maturation block. So the cells are dysplastic. So we have lots of dysplastic cells in the bone marrow. Yeah, so we have lots of dysplastic cells in the bone marrow. But the important thing is, in this case, you don't have it over 20%. Okay, so there are lots of myeloblasts, but they won't go over 20%. So there's more than 2% of them, or 5%, as that would be a normal percentage, but it's less than 20%. So if you have 1,000 mutations in the, typically, let's say it could be early progenitor, but mainly we usually imagine a hematopoietic stem cell. And if this stem cell has this second class mutation, you will have lots of dysplastic cells in the bone marrow, but they don't go over 20%. Okay? So, and what do you call that? It's the myelodysplastic syndrome. Okay? So this is the myelodysplastic syndrome. And watch out. Of course, we're talking about flavors. Okay? So, of course, every myelodysplastic syndrome is different in a way because the cells have different mutations. There are many mutations. But if they're, and I'm going to be very general over here, but rather having a maturation block, the problem is going to be in, first of all, could be in a transcription factor. That's typical because transcription factors are very important to, let's say, lead the way, lead the line, and tell the cells how to maturate. So if there is a mutation in transcription factor, there's going to be a maturation block. Also, it could be a mutation within the epigenetic regulators, or of course, in tumor suppressor genes. So as an example of the transcription factor mutation, you can remember RUNX1. You call it also a AML1, or it could be CEPPA as example, or GATA2. You don't have to know this, but so if there's one of these mutations, is the class 2 mutation, and you will have very likely dysplastic cells. Okay. If there's something with epigenetic regulators, yeah, you're going to have problems with methylation of DNA, or there's something with the histone modification. And if it's a tumor suppressor gene, of course, we can mention the TP53 mutation, so it's about DNA damage and repair. Okay, so these mutations, and it's a, of course, heterogeneous group, but if there's one of these mutations, you should rather expect to have, let's say, dysplastic cells in the bone marrow, but there are not too many of them. Well, and what is myelodysplastic syndrome? It's great to remember the older term, which is proleukemia. Proleukemia, it's an older term, and tells you that if you see this, in a few years, you're going to have leukemia, okay? So proleukemia, very good to remember, and it's so true because typically every year 20% of myelodysplastic syndromes, they convert, they transform. So there's a transformation. So in 2/3, they transform into AML, and in 1/3, then they transform into ALL. Okay, and the reason is because it's the mutation of the stem cell. So still the stem cell can mutate also to ALL. Okay. So not only myeloid lineage, but in 1/3 it can get to lymphoid lineage. Yeah. So that's one thing. So typically, it's very typical. It's the transformation they go on. The other synonym, old synonym for myelodysplastic syndrome is refractory anemia. And this is so good for you to remember because refractory anemia, why was that? Well, they gave these patients iron, they gave them B12, they gave them folate, but it wasn't working. Okay, so it was, well, why? Because it's a mutation of the blasts. Okay, so typically they have pancytopenia, and this is so crucial. Remember that typically, although there could be increased turnover because of the blasts, it's like not so huge as in leukemias, acute leukemias, and typically you have pancytopenia. So again, anemia, again, bleeding, again, infection. Okay, so, and typically they die on bleeding or infection, okay, even before they transform into leukemia. And because there is a certain turnover, you can have, not as common as in leukemias, whatever, but there's an increased turnover of nuclei because of the blast. So you can have also hyperuricemia. So you can have, and typically if you have high uric acid, yeah, you should be afraid of acute kidney injury, okay? So this is possible. So remember, the hematopoiesis is in this case not effective. So typically anemias, bleedings, and infections, okay? So myelodysplastic syndrome, okay? Mutation of the second class. We're gonna get to mutations of the first class. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. And as always, check the description below for supplementary questions and other materials.